The house was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that presses down on you, heavy and suffocating. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the old piano in the corner, its keys covered in dust and shadow. Her fingers hovered above them, trembling, as if even touching them could get her caught. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Her parents were asleep, or at least she hoped so, but she knew that one wrong creak of the floorboards, one misplaced sound, could ruin everything. For 14 years, Emily had lived under rules that made no space for dreams like hers. Rules set by parents who believed ambition was measured by grades, exams, and certificates. Music, piano, art, that was nonsense. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Dreams don't pay bills, Emily. Focus on what matters. Her mother would nod quietly beside him, her smile soft but unyielding, like a silent agreement that Emily's dream was worthless. And yet, that dream never left her. It had started years ago, the first time she had heard a real piano at a dull school assembly. Then the music began. A girl walked onto the stage, sat at the piano, and pressed a single key, and Emily's chest had stopped. The sound wasn't just a note. It was a story, a heartbeat, a whisper of something she had been missing. Her eyes had widened, and for the first time, she felt a fire ignite inside her chest. The first time she asked her father if she could learn, she had been 10. Can I learn piano? She had asked. He had glanced at her without expression. No. Just one word. Cold. Final. Crushing. Emily had swallowed her disappointment and nodded, hiding the pain in her chest. That one word haunted her for years. But the dream didn't die. It grew, quietly, invisibly. She started listening secretly, memorizing melodies. It was Sarah who changed everything. Sarah, the loud, fearless girl at school who seemed to care about nothing. Sarah's house was alive. Music floated from the living room. Laughter echoed. Sunlight spilled across books and paintings. And in the corner sat a piano. Emily froze. To Emily, it was magic. Go ahead, Sarah said casually. Try it? Emily shook her head. I don't know how to play. Emily placed her trembling fingers on the keys and pressed one. The sound resonated in the room, soft but clear. It was real. And in that moment, Emily made a decision. If se couldn't have permission, she would take it anyway. The first night she tried at home was terrifying. She dusted it off, hands shaking, heart pounding. But she pressed the keys anyway, softly at first, hesitantly. Every note a whisper, a secret of defiance. Night after night, Emily returned. After her parents slept, the piano became her voice, her secret, her rebellion. Then, one night, something changed. She was lost in the music, tears slipping silently down her face. And in that suspended, fragile moment, she heard Italiano, a creak. The door, slowly. She turned her head, and there they were. Her father, her mother, standing in the doorway. Emily's stomach dropped. Her worst fear had arrived. Her secret had been found. Her hands trembled, her breath caught. But for the first time, Emily realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as her parents stood silently in the doorway, their shadows stretching long across the floor. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to hide, to apologize, but the music in her soul refused to be silenced. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. Yet the notes she had just played seemed to cling to the air, echoing in the small room like fragile ghosts of her courage. Her father's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned her face. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line, a mixture of disappointment and something Emily couldn't read. And yet, as terrifying as the moment was, Emily felt a strange surge of pride. For the first time, she knew that she was doing something that truly belonged to her, something that no rule, no voice of disapproval could take away. Her father's voice finally broke the silence, deep and controlled. "Emily, what do you think you're doing?" There was no anger in the tone, at least not openly, but every word carried the weight of years of restraint, of expectations, of plans that didn't include her dreams. Emily's throat went dry. She wanted to explain, to tell them that this was who she was. That music wasn't a distraction or a phase, it was life itself, but the words seemed to vanish into the thick, heavy air. Instead, she looked down at her hands, still hovering above the keys, and let the silence speak for her. Her mother stepped forward, a hesitant shadow moving through the doorway. "Emily, we just don't understand," she said softly, almost pleading. Her voice trembled, betraying a worry she never let show before. "We've always wanted what's best for you. School, exams, a future we can be sure of." Emily's chest tightened. She had heard this so many times before, but hearing it now, after years of secret nights at the piano, it felt like a verdict. Her dream, her music, was being measured against expectations she never agreed to. But Emily's gaze flicked back to the piano. The keys gleamed faintly under the dim light, inviting her, daring her, reminding her that the music she had felt since she was 10 wasn't a mistake. I can't stop," she whispered, voice breaking but firm. This is me. I can't pretend it doesn't exist." The words hung in the air, fragile and defiant. Her parents' expression shifted subtly. Father's brow furrowed. Her mother's lips quivered, but for a moment, no one spoke. Then, something unexpected happened. Her father sighed. A long, weary sound that carried years of responsibility and frustration. "Emily?" he said finally. Softer now. "We didn't realize. Jobe been practicing all this time." The words were cautious, almost hesitant, as if admitting it made the world more dangerous. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Every moment of stolen music, every night of secret melodies, every ounce of fear and exhilaration, everything was laid bare in that single acknowledgement. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and she crossed the room slowly, standing beside her daughter. "We were afraid," she admitted, voice shaking. "Afraid that you'd get hurt, that you'd be disappointed, that you'd fail. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe music, maybe your dream is worth the risk." Emily's heart soared and broke all at once. She wanted to reach out, to hug them, but years of restraint and fear had made her cautious. She sat frozen, letting their words wash over her, unsure if this was forgiveness or a new kind of test. And then, as if sensing her hesitation, Emily did the only thing she could. She pressed her fingers gently on the keys. One note, pure and trembling. Another, stronger, more confident. And then a third, cascading like sunlight through a window. Her parents watched in silence, the room heavy with the weight of their own emotions. And slowly, as Emily played, a transformation occurred. The music that had once been secret, fragile, forbidden, became alive. It filled the room, spilling over walls, wrapping them all in something raw, real, and undeniable. The notes told a story her parents couldn't deny, a story of longing, of perseverance, of courage. Emily played with everything she had. The fear, the hope, the love, the defiance, all spilling from her fingers onto the keys. And as the music grew, so did something else, a bridge between her world and theirs. Her parents weren't just observers now. They were witnesses. Witnesses to the truth of her soul, the fire she had nurtured in secret, and the strength that had given her to keep going despite everything. By the time the last note lingered and faded into silence, Emily's hands were shaking, her chest heaved, and tears streaked her face, mixing with sweat from the adrenaline that had carried her through. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the heavy breathing of all three of them. Then her father finally spoke, voice low and almost broken. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I never realized. I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was wrong." Her mother reached out, placing a tentative hand on Emily's shoulder. "We don't fully understand it yet," she said, voice trembling. "But we see it. We see you. And maybe that's what matters most." Emily felt a warmth she hadn't known she could feel toward them, even after years of tension, disappointment, and unspoken rules. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete forgiveness. But it was something far more precious. Acknowledgement, understanding, and a fragile opening toward acceptance. Over the next few weeks, Emily's secret world began to shift. She was still cautious, still careful not to overstep boundaries, but the fear that had once consumed her began to ease. Her parents watched her in silence sometimes, listening from the hallway, sometimes asking quietly about the pieces she was learning. Their curiosity was hesitant, tinged with worry, but it was there. And in those moments, Emily felt a strange, exhilarating mix of triumph and vulnerability. Her dream was no longer entirely hidden. It had a place in the world she had always feared would reject it. Still, not everything was easy. The fear of being judged by others, the challenge of learning properly, and the looming expectations of schoolwork created constant tension. Each day was a tightrope walk between ambition and obligation. Emily found herself practicing in short bursts, stealing moments between homework, chores, and the lingering wariness in her parents' eyes. But even those small moments became sacred. Each note she played, each melody she conquered, was a tiny victory, a whisper of freedom she had fought years to hear. And then came the day that changed everything. Sarah, her friend and ally in the secret world of music, arrived with news that made Emily's pulse quicken. "There's a competition," she said, eyes sparkling with excitement and challenge. "A big one. People from all over the state, and they're looking for talent your age. You should enter." Emily froze, caught between exhilaration and panic. Competitions were dangerous exposure, judgment, failure, but the thought of playing on a real stage, with real people listening, made her stomach twist with longing. Her mind raced. Could she do it? Could she risk her secret being fully revealed? Her parents' cautious support tested in the harsh light of public scrutiny. But the thought of not trying, of hiding forever, of letting her music die before it had even had a chance, that was unbearable. Emily's hands itched to play, to pour her soul into the keys, to tell the world in notes what she had only whispered in shadows. That night, she returned to the piano with a renewed determination. Her parents watched silently from the doorway. No words, only careful observation. Emily's fingers danced over the keys with a confidence she had never felt before. The music was richer, fuller, alive with every ounce of her struggle and hope. And as the notes soared through the quiet house, she knew one thing with perfect clarity. She would enter the competition. She would take her music into the world, no matter the fear, no matter the risk. It was a decision that would change everything. Emily had stepped from the shadows of her secret into the uncertain, thrilling light of possibility. And though the path ahead was unknown, the music within her had never been stronger. The dream that had been forbidden, hidden, and almost silenced was now awakening in ways even she could not imagine. Emily's journey was far from over. The piano had been a sanctuary, a teacher, and a witness to her courage. But the real test was coming, one that would challenge not only her skill, but her heart, her spirit, and the fragile bonds she was beginning to rebuild with her parents. And as the moonlight streamed through the window and the house settled into quiet, Emily pressed one final note, feeling it vibrate through her very being, a promise to herself and the world. She would not stop. Not now. Not ever. The day of the competition arrived with a quiet, unsettling tension. Emily had barely slept, her mind alive with 1,000 notes and doubts, her heart drumming a rhythm that no piano could mimic. She had practiced tirelessly in the weeks since Sarah's announcement, every spare moment stolen between homework, chores, and careful glances at her parents. Kotsios. Probal? Her mother had even offered a soft smile that morning, a gesture Emily almost didn't dare hope for, and her father had nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that she could not take for granted. But now, as she stood outside the large auditorium, the reality of performing in front of strangers, judges, and potential critics hit her like a tidal wave. The line of competitors stretched across the lobby, some chatting nervously, some pacing, some whispering last-minute scales under their breath. Emily felt like a ghost moving among them, unseen yet hyper-aware of every glance, every step, every whisper of anticipation. She clutched her music sheets tightly, though she had memorized every note. It wasn't just about memory, it was about courage, about putting her heart, her secret, her soul, on display for people who knew nothing of the years she had fought to reach this moment. Sarah appeared beside her, grinning, radiant with excitement. "You've got this," she whispered, giving Emily's shoulder a squeeze. It was a simple gesture, but it anchored her, reminding her she wasn't alone. When it was finally her turn, Emily walked onto the stage, the polished wood gleaming beneath her shoes. The auditorium lights were blinding at first, and the hush of the audience was a living thing, pressing against her chest, threatening to suffocate her. But then she saw the piano, its black and white keys gleaming like a bridge to another world, and for a fleeting heartbeat, the fear dissolved. She remembered the dark, quiet nights at home, the stolen melodies, the first tremulous notes that had sparked her dream. This was the culmination of every secret practice, every whispered wish, every tear shed in shadowed corners of her room. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and let her fingers hover above the keys. The first note escaped, fragile yet full of honesty. A ripple ran through the audience, a murmur of recognition, curiosity, and intrigue. Emily closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her rather than from her, letting it tell the story of years of defiance, of hope, of a dream that had survived silence and doubt. The notes wove together like threads of memory. The fear, the loneliness, the secret thrill of discovery, the quiet rebellion against rules that had tried to cage her spirit. She played with a vulnerability that was almost painful to feel, yet in that very vulnerability lay an unstoppable strength. Every crescendo, every pause, every trembling note carried the weight of everything she had endured and the promise of everything she could become. Halfway through, she felt a tremor of panic. Her fingers stumbled over a tricky passage, a note clanging harshly where it should have soared. The audience gasped slightly. The judge's pens paused mid-note, and Emily's chest tightened. She had imagined perfection, but reality was messier, scarier, louder. A voice in her mind whispered that she should stop, that she should retreat, that she wasn't ready. And yet, another voice, stronger and fiercer, reminded her of every night she had risked being caught at home, every creak of floorboard, every whispered note that had made her feel alive. She took a shaky breath and pressed on, letting imperfection become beauty, letting fear transform into energy, letting every flaw speak louder than silence ever could. By the time she reached the final chord, her hands were shaking, her body trembling, and her heart racing like a wild drum. She held the note, letting it linger, letting it settle into the audience, into the room, into herself. And then, silence. The kind of silence that wasn't emptiness, but a holding of breath, a waiting, a suspended moment where the world seemed to acknowledge the courage it had witnessed. And then the applause. It started quietly, sporadically, then grew, sweeping over the stage like a wave. Emily opened her eyes, blinking against tears she hadn't realized were falling. Faces in the audience were smiling, nodding, some even standing. Her hands dropped from the keys, trembling, and she felt a rush of relief, pride, and disbelief crash over her all at once. Backstage, Sarah enveloped her in a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You were amazing." Emily could barely speak, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the moment. The judge's comments followed. Praise, questions, curiosity. They wanted to know her technique, her inspiration, her story. For the first time, Emily realized that her music wasn't just her secret anymore. It had a life of its own, touching others in ways she had never imagined. People were not just hearing notes, they were feeling years of struggle, hope, defiance, and heart in every carefully chosen key. But as the celebration buzzed around her, Emily felt a flicker of doubt. What would her parents think if they heard about the competition? Would their support waver now that the risk was public? Could she continue to chase her dream without fracturing the fragile trust she had begun to build at home? Questions spun through her mind, tangled and heavy. Yet beneath the swirl of uncertainty was a steady truth. She had faced fear before, in the shadows of her room, in secret, and emerged stronger. Now, she had taken that courage into the light. When she returned home that evening, the house was quiet, but different. There was a shift in the air, a subtle acknowledgement that something had changed. Her parents were waiting in the living room, her father sitting rigidly, her mother fidgeting with her hands. Emily braced herself, ready for either praise or reproach, ready for disappointment or incredulity. But instead, Her father stood slowly, walked to the piano, and touched the keys with a tentative reverence. "You played beautifully," he said, voice low, almost unsteady. "I can hear the years of effort, the fire. I think we finally understand. Maybe not everything, but enough to see you." Her mother's eyes glistened with tears, and she reached out to take Emily's hand. "We're proud," she said simply, "not just for what you played, but for the courage it took to do it." For the first time in years, Emily felt the full weight of acceptance, not just of her music, but of her spirit, her choices, herself. The journey was far from over. Challenges awaited, competitions, critics, the balancing act of schoolwork and music, and the ever-present risk of failure. But she had discovered something far more valuable than accolades or applause. She had discovered that her dreams were worth the fear, worth the risk, worth every stolen note and trembling key. She had discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. And as she sat at the piano that night, alone in the quiet house with the moonlight spilling across the keys, Emily played once more. The music was different, now stronger, richer, freer. Each note a declaration, each melody a promise. Her dream, once forbidden in secret, was alive in the world and in her heart. It had found a home that no one could take away. The weeks after her first competition were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily had tasted the thrill of performing publicly, but with it came a new kind of pressure. The world outside her quiet home had expectations now, and the whispers of judgment that had once been imaginary were suddenly real. Teachers asked about her talent. Classmates piqued with curiosity, and even strangers on social media began commenting on her videos. Had uploaded a few clips of her performance with her permission. At first, Emily had been thrilled by the attention, but the thrill quickly twisted into anxiety. Every comment, every like, every subtle comparison to other performers became a weight pressing on her chest. Her secret world, once a sanctuary, now felt fragile under the harsh glare of public eyes. The next competition was bigger statewide, with dozens of talented young musicians, each one polished, confident, and ready to compete. Emily's excitement was tinged with fear. She had practiced relentlessly, but doubts gnawed at her. Was she really ready for this? Would the judges see the imperfections she feared? Could she survive the scrutiny, the comparisons, the possibility of failure? The piano, which had once been a safe haven, now felt like a stage for judgment, a mirror reflecting every insecurity she had hidden for years. Even Sarah noticed the change. "You've got to remember why you play," she said, tugging Emily aside during a rehearsal. "Not for them. Not for likes or scores. For you. That's why you're here." Emily nodded, but the words only partially reached the knots of fear and anticipation in her stomach. On the day of the state competition, the auditorium buzzed with activity. Musicians rehearsed last-minute pieces, stagehands moved instruments into place, and the audience trickled in, filling the seats with chatter and rustling programs. Emily sat backstage, her fingers itching to touch the keys, her mind repeating every scale, every passage, every trembling note she had practiced. The air was thick with tension, almost suffocating, yet exhilarating. She remembered the first time her parents had discovered her secret, the fear and defiance that had surged through her. That fear had become strength, that defiance had become courage, but now, courage felt fragile in a sea of expectation. She glanced at her parents in the audience, their faces masked with smiles and quiet concern. The stakes were higher. This wasn't just a personal test anymore, it was a public one. When Emily stepped onto the stage, the spotlight was blinding. Every eye in the room seemed to pierce through her. Every whisper and shuffle amplified. She took her seat at the grand piano, the polished black surface gleaming under the lights. The judges' faces were unreadable, poised with pens and clipboards, ready to dissect her performance. Emily's heart pounded so violently she thought it might escape her chest. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered the quiet nights at home, the first hesitant notes, the trembling fingers, the thrill of defying rules in secret. This was where it all began, and she refused to let fear steal it from her. The music began, delicate at first, like a whisper, but as her fingers gained confidence, the notes swelled, rising like a tide that refused to be contained. Emily played with everything she had. The fear, the longing, the rebellion, the hope. The room became a vessel for her soul. Every note a declaration, every pause a heartbeat. And for a moment, she forgot the judges, the audience, the stakes. She was alone with the piano, just as she had been countless nights ago in her dark room. But perfection is a cruel companion. Halfway through her piece, her hand faltered on a tricky passage. The note clanged, jarring and raw. Emily froze, her chest tightening, a flush of embarrassment scorching her cheeks. She could hear the faint whisper of a gasp from the audience. Panic surged, threatening to overwhelm her. She closed her eyes, shaking, and pressed on. Each note became a battle against her own self-doubt. Tears pricked at her eyes, not just for the fear, but for the memories of the years spent hiding, sneaking, and dreaming. She played through trembling fingers, transforming every mistake into a part of the story. The music became raw, emotional, alive in a way that polished perfection could never capture. By the final chord, Emily's hands were trembling, her breath ragged, and her heart a wild drum in her chest. Silence followed, stretching unbearably, and then the applause. It started slowly, almost uncertainly, and then swelled into a roar. Emily's eyes filled with tears as the audience rose to their feet. For the first time, she felt that her music, her soul, was truly seen, acknowledged, understood. Backstage, Emily collapsed into Sarah's arms, trembling. "You are incredible," Sarah whispered, eyes sparkling. They felt it. They really felt it. Emily wanted to believe it, but the lingering fear of judgment gnawed at her. The judges approached, scribbling notes, whispering, and offering feedback. It was glowing, yes, but the words were tinged with expectation. "You have talent beyond your years," one said, "but there is room to grow. Don't stop now." Emily nodded silently, feeling the weight of those words. Talent was not enough. She needed resilience, courage, and an unwavering belief in herself. And even as pride surged, doubt remained. Could she keep going? Step after step, note after note, without breaking under pressure. That night, returning home, Emily felt a mixture of elation and exhaustion. Her parents greeted her with hugs, their pride unspoken but tangible. "You did something incredible today," her father murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Her mother nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "We've never seen you shine like this before," she whispered. Emily smiled weakly, the adrenaline fading, leaving a raw vulnerability in its place. She had tasted success, but she had also glimpsed the harsh truth of ambition, that every victory carried the seeds of fear and expectation, and that her journey was only beginning. The following weeks brought new challenges. Other competitions loomed, each one larger and more demanding. Schoolwork piled up, social pressures grew, and Emily's family began to navigate their own adjustments to her public talent. With every performance, she had to face fear anew, balancing hope with anxiety, courage with vulnerability. Yet through every setback, every misstep, every tremor of doubt, Emily discovered a profound truth. Her music was more than notes on a page. It was her identity, her voice, her rebellion against limits, her declaration that she would not be silenced. And as she practiced, late into the night, fingers flying over the keys, tears sometimes mixing with sweat, she understood that the journey, painful, beautiful, terrifying, was exactly what made the music real. The day of the national competition arrived like a storm, a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation that Emily had never felt before. Months of practice, countless late nights, and years of secret determination had led her here. The auditorium was massive, the kind that swallowed you whole, with balconies stretching high above and rows of seats filled with strangers whose eyes seemed to pierce right through her. Emily's stomach twisted with nerves, but beneath it all, a quiet flame of resolve burned steadily. This was more than a competition. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun in the shadows, in stolen moments at a dusty piano in her bedroom. Every note she had ever played, every risk she had taken, every fear she had faced it, all led to this. Backstage, the other competitors moved with ease, confident in their rehearsals, polished and poised. Emily felt like an imposter at first, small and fragile amidst them. She clutched her music sheets, though she knew every note by heart, the whispers of her teachers, the encouraging words from Sarah. The quiet approval of her parents, all of it, collided in her chest, creating a whirlwind of pressure and longing. Her fingers itched to touch the keys. Her heart pounded, and her mind tried to quiet itself, reminding her it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. It was about letting the music speak the truth she had hidden for so long. When she finally walked onto the stage, the spotlight was blinding. The audience was enormous, silent in anticipation, their gaze heavy on her. She seated herself at the grand piano, the polished black surface gleaming under the harsh lights. Emily took a deep breath, recalling the first night she had dared to touch the keys at home. The fear, the trembling, the thrill. She remembered her parents in the doorway that night, their silence a mirror of both judgment and curiosity. And now, years later, she felt their presence again, not in person, but in memory, in the knowledge that they had allowed her to grow, to fight for a dream. That thought steadied her, gave her courage, and slowly, she let her fingers hover above the keys. The first note resonated through the vast hall, delicate but clear. Emily closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her rather than from her, letting it carry every ounce of struggle, every secret night of practice, every dream she had been told to abandon. The notes rose and fell like a living thing, telling a story of defiance and hope, of fear transformed into courage. She played with everything she had, the trembling uncertainty of a young girl, the burning determination of a dreamer, the raw emotion of someone who had spent years hiding who she truly was. And the audience felt it. They weren't just hearing a performance, they were witnessing a soul laid bare. Every note, a heartbeat, every chord, a confession. Halfway through, a mistake threatened to derail her. Her fingers faltered on a difficult passage, the note clanging harshly in the silence of the hall. Emily's chest tightened, and for a moment, she felt panic clawing at her. Years of hiding, of secret practice, of silent courage all felt like they might unravel in an instant. But then she remembered the nights at home, the stolen melodies, the fire in her heart that had never allowed her to give up. She drew a deep breath, feeling every tremor of fear transform into energy, and pressed on. The notes that followed were richer, more expressive, alive with every emotion she had ever felt. Imperfection became beauty, vulnerability became strength, and the music became more than notes. It became a testament to everything she had endured. When the final chord rang out, it lingered in the air like a held breath, a fragile, shimmering echo that seemed to settle over the entire auditorium. Emily's hands rested on the keys, trembling, and tears streamed down her face, not from fear or frustration, but from relief, triumph, and the overwhelming weight of the journey she had completed. Silence followed her, silence so profound it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. And then, slowly, it began. Applause, first tentative, then growing louder, until the entire hall erupted in cheers, standing in ovation. Emily blinked against her tears, overwhelmed by the sheer force of emotion. She had not just played music. She had told her story, and the world had listened. Backstage, Sarah enveloped her in a tight hug, both of them shaking with adrenaline and joy. "You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. They felt everything. Your courage, your struggle, your heart. Emily could barely speak, overcome by emotion, but she nodded, feeling the truth of those words pulse through her veins. This was more than winning or losing. This was validation not of talent alone, but of years of persistence, of refusing to let her dream be silenced. She realized that the applause outside, though intoxicating, was secondary. What mattered most was that she had remained true to herself, that she had risked everything to show the world who she truly was. Later that evening, when Emily returned home, the house was quiet but welcoming. Her parents were waiting in the living room, faces illuminated by soft lamplight, hearts open in a way that no words could fully capture. Her father embraced her first, a rare warmth in his usually composed demeanor. "Emily," he said, voice thick with emotion, "we've watched you grow into someone we barely recognize. Someone brave, strong, and remarkable. Your music, it's not just talent, it's you, and we see it now, fully." Her mother stepped forward, tears glinting in her eyes, taking Emily's hands gently. We've always wanted the best for you, she said softly. But we were wrong to think that meant keeping your dreams small. You've shown us what it means to fight for what matters. We're proud of you more than words can say. Emily sank into their embrace, feeling a flood of emotions she had carried for years. Fear, doubt, relief, joy, and finally, acceptance. For so long, her dreams had existed in the shadows, hidden from those who should have nurtured them. Now, they were no longer secret, no longer fragile. They were alive, vibrant, undeniable, and a love and acknowledgement she felt from her parents, though imperfect and tentative, was real and sustaining. It was the final note in a symphony that had begun in silence and secrecy and had grown into something unforgettable. The days that followed were filled with celebration, reflection, and quiet moments of gratitude. Emily continued to practice, not for competitions or accolades, but for herself, for the music that had given her life its deepest meaning. Invitations to perform came, opportunities that once would have seemed impossible, and each one she approached with a mix of excitement and humility. She knew the path ahead would be challenging. Every stage would demand courage, every performance a test of heart, but she had learned that fear was not the enemy. Fear was a companion, a reminder of how far she had come, of the fire that burned within her, and she would carry it with her, channel it into every note, into every melody, into every audience she touched. One quiet evening, Emily returned to her piano at home. The house was still, the soft glow of moonlight falling across the keys. She sat down, fingers brushing lightly over the familiar surface, and began to play. The notes flowed effortlessly, but each one carried depth, maturity, and emotion that only years of struggle could create. It was a music of triumph, yes, but also of memory, of the secret nights, of stolen moments, of doubt and fear, transformed into strength. Her parents listened from the doorway, silent, content, and finally, Emily realized that the journey she had begun alone had now become shared, a bridge between her world and theirs. They no longer simply tolerated her dream. They embraced it, celebrated it, allowed it to flourish alongside them. As the last notes lingered and faded into the quiet house, Emily leaned back, eyes closed, a smile playing on her lips. She thought of Sarah, of the competitions, of the mistakes and triumphs, of the years she had risked and the courage she had found. Her dream, once forbidden, hidden, and fragile, was now her reality, alive and vibrant, a force that could never be taken away. And in that moment, she understood the ultimate truth. Success is not measured by applause, trophies, or recognition. Success is measured by the courage to chase your dream, to risk everything for it, to play your own music even when the world tries to tell you it doesn't matter. And with that, Emily pressed a final, gentle chord. It lingered in the room, warm and full, a testament to every struggle, every triumph, and every moment of courage that had brought her here. Her journey was not over, not by a long shot, but she had discovered something far more important than victory. She had discovered herself, and that discovery, above all else, was worth every note, every tear, and every silent night spent chasing the music that would forever define her.